Standing in the pouring rain, Aisha clutched a single small bag to her chest, the leather soaked through and the handle digging into her palm. Behind the massive iron gates of the Blackwood estate, Beatrice stood under a pristine silk umbrella, her face twisted in a sneer of pure triumph. "You were nothing but a temporary distraction for my brother, a charity project he got bored with," Beatrice spat, her voice cutting through the sound of the storm. "Now take your rags and crawl back to the slums you came from, little maid, before I have the dogs clear the trash from my driveway." She slowly reached down, picked up her ruined passport, and wiped the mud from it with a calm, methodical grace. She looked at the diamond-encrusted watch on Beatrice's wrist, and then directly into the older woman's eyes. "You have exactly 10 minutes to pack your things and leave this property," Aisha said, her voice low and steady. "The clock is ticking, Beatrice. Welcome to our story of justice and hidden truths. But before we find out how a grieving widow turned the tables on her greedy in-laws, I want to get to know you better. Who is watching us today? Tell us in the comments which city or country you are tuning in from. And if you believe that karma always finds its way home, make sure to subscribe to the channel right now and hit that like button to support Aisha's journey. Now let us dive into the cold, calculated world of the Blackwood Empire. The rain felt like needles against Aisha's skin, but the cold outside was nothing compared to the chill in the living room just an hour earlier. Arthur Blackwood, a man of immense power and even greater heart, had been laid to rest only 3 hours ago. The soil on his grave was still fresh, yet his family had already begun the autopsy of his fortune. In the grand mahogany-paneled library, the atmosphere was thick with greed. Beatrice, Arthur's eldest sister, was already draped in his late mother's pearls, draped over a velvet armchair like a queen claiming a throne. Beside her stood Marcus, Arthur's nephew, a man whose expensive Italian suit couldn't hide the desperation of a gambling addict drowning in debt. They didn't see a grieving widow when they looked at Aisha. They saw a woman whose skin tone and humble background made her, in their eyes, an intruder in their ancestral halls. Beatrice had wasted no time. She brandished a yellowed piece of paper, claiming it was a will Arthur had written years before he ever met Aisha. This document, she claimed, left everything to the bloodline, leaving Aisha with nothing but the clothes on her back. Aisha had sat in the corner, her silence mistaken for defeat. She remembered the nights she spent with Arthur, not discussing diamonds or stocks, but the legacy of kindness he wanted to leave behind. He had warned her that his family shared his blood, but none of his soul. Marcus, emboldened by Aisha's silence, had grabbed her bag, dumping its contents onto the Persian rug. A gold necklace tumbled out, a gift Arthur had given her on their first anniversary. "Thief!" Marcus had shouted, his voice cracking with artificial outrage. "You were already looting the house before the body was even cold." That was the moment they called the security detail, men who had once bowed to Aisha but now took orders from the person they thought held the checkbook. They escorted her to the gate in the middle of a thunderstorm, refusing to let her take even her coat. As the gates locked with a heavy metallic thud, Aisha stood in the mud, feeling the weight of the photograph in her pocket, the last picture of her and Arthur laughing in the garden. But Aisha knew something they didn't. She knew that Arthur Blackwood was a man of contingencies. Inside the house, the celebration had already begun. Marcus was pouring 1945 vintage cognac, laughing about how easy it had been to toss the scavenger out. Beatrice was already on the phone with an interior designer, talking about gutting Aisha's favorite sunroom to turn it into a walk-in closet for her furs. They were so blinded by their own arrogance that they didn't hear the heavy front door open. They didn't notice the arrival of Mr. Stevens, the family's longtime legal counsel, until he was standing in the center of the room, his trench coat dripping onto the floor they thought they owned. Beatrice greeted him with a sharp laugh, waving her fake will in the air, demanding he start the probate process immediately. She expected him to bow. She expected him to congratulate her. He didn't even glance at the paper Beatrice was shoving in his face. His first words weren't about money or land. "Where is Mrs. Blackwood?" he asked, his voice echoing in the high-ceilinged room. Beatrice waved a hand dismissively, telling him the help had been dismissed for theft. Mr. Stevens didn't argue. He simply opened his briefcase and pulled out a sleek, black envelope sealed with a heavy gold wax stamp. "This," he announced, "is the only legal and binding last will and testament of Arthur Blackwood, signed and witnessed just 7 days before his passing." The room went silent. The clinking of ice stopped. Marcus froze with the decanter in midair. As Mr. Stevens began to read, the air seemed to leave the room. Arthur had been meticulous. He acknowledged his sister's greed and his nephew's vices with surgical precision. The will stated that the entirety of the Blackwood estate, the global shipping empire, the real estate holdings, and every cent in the offshore accounts were to be placed in a singular trust. The sole trustee and owner of that trust was Aisha Blackwood. The gasps from Beatrice and Marcus were drowned out by the lawyer's steady voice as he reached the most devastating part, the conduct clause. Arthur had known they would try to hurt her. He had inserted a provision stating that any family member who attempted to harass, legalistically challenge, or physically remove Aisha from the home would be immediately and permanently disinherited from their existing monthly stipends. By throwing her out into the rain, Beatrice hadn't just lost the inheritance. She had lost her own lifestyle. Just then, the front doors opened again. Aisha walked in. She was soaked to the bone, her hair clinging to her face, but she walked with the posture of a monarch. "I told you 10 minutes, Aisha said softly. "You've used 5 of them." Marcus tried to stammer an apology, mentioning family bonds and misunderstandings, but Aisha simply raised a hand. "I know about the gambling debts, Marcus. And Beatrice, I know you've been skimming from the family charity for years." Aisha called for the head of security, the same man who had pushed her out an hour ago. He stood at attention, his face flushed with shame. "Escort these visitors to the gate," Aisha commanded. "They are not to take anything that wasn't theirs before they entered this house today." Aisha walked to Arthur's study and sat in his large leather chair. She wasn't thinking about the billions. She was thinking about the school she would build and the promise she made. Justice isn't just a word. It's a reckoning, and Aisha was just getting started. If you enjoyed seeing Aisha reclaim her power, please show your support. Subscribe to our channel, hit the notification bell, and give this video a big thumbs up. Thank you for watching.